All right, guys, thanks for coming to the meeting today. We're gonna be naming our brand new hybrid mid-size crossover.
Question, is it fast? Is it powerful?
Absolutely not.
Perfect, I have a name for it.
Great.
Approacha. Sounds Italian, sounds exotic.
Did you just take the word approach and add an A onto the end of it?
No.
Anybody else?
I got an idea.
Are you eating soup in a meeting?
What is it, a crime to drink soup in a meeting?
No.
How about we call it the X5 STI M440i X Drive P-ZEV?
That's great. How'd you come up with that?
I don't know.
Well, that's awesome. Really love the synergy, guys. Does anyone else have any other pitches?
E-bussy.
Hey, Rich, did you, by any chance, Google that? Car names are dumb. Today on Wheelhouse, where do car names come from? Why do some areas of the world do it differently than others? Why are they dumb so often? And at the end, I'll choose the definitive 5 worst car names of all time. Big thanks to Omaze for sponsoring today's video. I cannot see anything out of these things. It's like very chrome. I'm gonna change, okay. I might look like 2021 Nolan, but as you can tell from this fit, I'm actually from the year 3000, where skate parks are now hover parks. The president is a freaking cyborg, and yeah, we finally stopped robocalls. You might have to wait for all that cool stuff, but Omaze is bringing you the future today by giving you the chance to win this 2021 Ford Mustang Mach-E GT Performance with taxes and shipping included. Just go to omaze.com/Mustang Mach-E for your chance to win. This Mach-E features a panoramic fixed glass roof, Brembo brakes, and an RTR design package including 20-inch RTR Aero 5 wheels and NATO NT 555 G2 tread boys. That's tires for all you non-future people. And the best part is, every donation helps build a better future by supporting the Joey Logano Foundation, which uses the platform of motorsports to invest in organizations that offer second chances to children and young adults during times of crisis. Very cool. So go to omaze.com/Mustang Mach-E to enter for your chance to win and to help support a fantastic cause. Well, looks like future Job needs my help. Good luck. Because of recent cars like the Nissan Kicks and Hyundai Ioniq, it might seem like auto manufacturers don't put a lot of thought into their car names, but it's actually quite the opposite. It's always been this way. It even took a while to land on the word automobile over competing names like Autobahn, Buggy-Ot, and the Oleo Locomotive. I think we chose the right one though. It was actually only when the New York Times mentioned the name automobile that it started gaining popularity, even though the newspaper hated it. On January 3rd of 1899, they wrote that the newfangled motor carriages, quote, are all unutterably ugly and never a one of them has been provided with a good or even an endurable name. The French have evolved automobile, which being half Greek and half Latin is so near to indecent that we print it with hesitation. I do say Greek and Latin, how scandalous. Puh! Since then, automobile companies have been in an endless contest to find the perfect, most sellable names for their cars. Sometimes they come up with a classic, like Ford Mustang. Sometimes they come up with an incomprehensible collection of letters and numbers, like the Mercedes GLS 350D 4MATIC. And sometimes they come up with the Mazda Titan Dump. Naming a car is a massive process. Think about it. These are huge companies, and not only are they spending millions to produce these vehicles, but they'll be spending millions on top of that to market the hell out of them. This name will be on billboards. Matthew McConaughey might mumble it in a commercial. So there are some requirements. Most obviously, the name has to appeal to the demographic it's being marketed to and has to be original enough to stand out. For example, in the early 2000s, there was a boom in crossover SUVs that ushered in names like Ford Escape and Nissan Rogue to attract a rebellious clientele that's definitely not following the herd. But it's not always that simple. There are a couple of huge obstacles that might derail an otherwise awesome car name. One is that someone maybe already trademarked it. There's not much use in trying to market a Chevy Xbox because that territory is pretty well claimed. Ford actually ran into this problem when they tried to sell the Mustang in Germany. Another company already owned the copyright, so Ford had to sell the pony car as the T5 over there. Doesn't really have the same ring to it. It's not even a horse. Can't ride a T5. How am I supposed to ride a T5? Another hurdle is that because car sales is a global business, most names have to work in any language, or at least not be offensive in any language. The most famous example of cars that broke these rules are probably the Chevy Nova and the Mazda La Puta. It seems like neither company had a Spanish-English dictionary on hand during the brainstorm. And let's not even dissect the thought process behind the e-bussy. Once the possible name has cleared the marketing department, the legal department, and the let's make sure this isn't the Swedish word for colonic department, it finally goes to the CEO for ultimate approval. This is true of pretty much any company these days, but there are some subtle ways that American, European, and Asian car companies all do it differently. The naming journey for American cars began about as simply as it could have, when Ford Motors introduced the original Model A in 1903. As Henry Ford continued to develop and experiment with new models, he named them the Model B, Model C, etc., all the way to the historically popular Model T, though not every new model was put on sale. The Model T is still one of the top 10 best-selling cars ever, so clearly no one was complaining about the name. And Ford liked this system so much that he even started it over in 1928 by reintroducing the new Model A. His rivals and former partners over at Cadillac used the same exact naming scheme as Ford, but they did perhaps make the first American car with an actual name in 1905. The Osceola Coupe was named after a Seminole chief and was an early prototype for closed-body vehicles. In the 1930s and 40s, some American companies began more commonly using word names rather than simple model names to try and chip away at Ford and Chevy's market dominance. Most notably, Studebaker used the two world wars as a backdrop to market models like the Commander, the President, and unfortunately, the Dictator. This is a contender for the earliest extremely stupid car name. Yo, Mussolini and Hitler and Franco, like, let's name cars after those guys. Really cool. By the 60s and 70s, marketing departments had finally wrestled control of naming away from engineers, and they thought it was important that American cars give the impression of power and speed, which led to cars like the Challenger, Charger, and Corvette. Another naming convention that quickly became popular among American manufacturers was to name cars after impressive animals. You had your Cougars, Stingrays, and Roadrunners. This makes sense. The right animal association instantly tells you something about the car, and Rams can't sue for trademark infringement. One notable downside to this naming scheme is that there's only so many cool animals to go around, which is how you end up with odd names like the Chevrolet Bison or Dodge Super Bee. And more generally, American companies definitely tend to get carried away with their endless search for bold, image-based names like the Pontiac Aztek, Ford Probe, and Dodge Dart Swinger. You get the idea. But really, how did Swinger get approved? I'm surprised it didn't come with like a pineapple decal on the side. Was it built for the buyer who's constantly swapping cars with their friends? How do you leave the party when your keys are in the fishbowl? I could go on. Like early American automakers, their European counterparts also saw a lot of sense in keeping track of their models with simple letters and numbers as labels. The difference is that they never really stopped, particularly the German luxury brands. On one hand, it's a good system because you don't have to worry about the BMW 330ci getting confused for anything except the barcode. And it can actually be helpful when consumers are considering their cars. I mean, for example, BMW has possibly the easiest of the alphanumeric names to decode. In the 330ci, the first 3 means 3 Series, the 30 means a 3-liter engine, C means coupe, and I means fuel injected. Somewhat similarly, Audi uses A, Q, and R, followed by 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. A means sedan, Q means SUV, and R means sports car. And the numbers ascend in size. If I want the roomiest Audi sedan, I'm looking for an A8. Easy. But the system has limits. For one thing, even if a name is a mix of numbers and letters, car companies still want it to be easy to pronounce. So it can't just be any numbers and letters. Nobody is ever gonna buy a BMW WW2. For another, the more cars you make, the more confusing the naming system gets, which is problematic if you want your car company to last a long time. Mercedes' naming system used to make a lot of sense, with the letters and numbers for each model correlating with the engine size and vehicle class. But they also didn't used to make nearly as many cars or trims as they do now. These days, they have confusing competing names like the SL, SLK, SLS, and CLS. BMW features the ultimate example of confusing and unnecessary lettering because in the 70s, they started adding the little lowercase I to models with a fuel-injected engine. This probably seemed like a cool and stylish way to advertise that these cars featured better technology. Except now, nearly every car these days uses fuel injection, and there's not really any point in bragging about it. But they're still sticking that little I on there on pretty much any car that's not diesel. The absolute worst name in BMW's lineup, though, has to be the M635 CSI, which sounds like either a default internet password or a new crime show starring David Caruso. Of course, it's not just European companies that still use letters or numbers to differentiate their models. Some of Tesla's first cars were the Model S and the Model X, and Elon Musk wanted to name their next car the Model E because he thought it was funny that the letters S-E-X spell sex. But Ford already owned the Model E trademark from back in Henry Ford's day. So Elon settled on the Model 3 because S3X almost spells sex. And of course, in 2019, Tesla unveiled the Model Y, an SUV that's extremely S-E-X-E and corny AF. Got him. Got you, Elon.
You think your naming conventions are funny, bro? You think it's funny to spell S-E-X? Are you S-I-X, bro? Nerd.
So American companies prefer big, bold, image-based names. European companies often stick with the alphanumeric combos of yore. And then there's Japan, which does a mix of both. But why? Well, for one thing, the major Asian car companies were generally founded more recently than the big automakers in the US and Europe. So by the time their cars became globally popular, it was already a well-established tradition that each one needed a good name to stand out. In fact, they were largely welcoming of American-style model names, to the point that nearly all Japanese cars are branded with English lettering, including those that stay in Japan. Former Nissan design chief Shiro Nakamura even told Jalopnik that he thinks Japanese cars will never have badges in Japanese because Japan is very culturally welcoming to words borrowed from other cultures. But that's not to say there's no Japanese influence on the naming process. Toyota's vehicle names often come from references to crowns, architecture, royalty, mythology, and natural patterns. The name Camry is a phonetic spelling of the Japanese word Kanmuri, which means crown, and also references to the Crown sedan, which Toyota has been making domestically in Japan since 1955. Similarly, the Corolla is named after the outer crown of a flower. However, there's also a lot of European influence, particularly in the Japanese luxury brands. The most prominent of these brands, Lexus, has a made-up name which Toyota says, quote, combines word roots evoking images of luxury and technology. To enhance that image, they borrowed the naming conventions from their German competitors and called their flagship car the LS, or luxury sedan. Honda and Nissan also went with European styling alphanumeric names when they introduced Acura and Infiniti, respectively. But when Japanese and Korean companies lack tradition to fall back on, they often seem focused on finding names that are cool and hip for the kids, aka your Kicks and your Kia Stingers. This points to another thing that has always been true about naming cars, both in Asia and around the globe. Sometimes it's just nonsense. Hyundai and Kia both love making up words, like the Veloster or the Sportage. One legendary story is that Mitsubishi wanted to take a page from the Americans' book and name their new sports coupe the Stallion, except that the name was misinterpreted on a garbled phone call with US representatives as the Mitsubishi Starion, and then they just kind of went with it. It's a cool name. Heck, Nissan literally named a car the Fair Lady because the head of the company liked the Broadway musical My Fair Lady so much. So we've learned how car makers name their cars. It's pretty straightforward. Choose a word that evokes the feeling you want associated with the design, and make sure it's not the Vietnamese word for prostate. But somehow, companies still mess it up. Without further ado, here are the unequivocal worst names in car history.
Number 5.
The Great Wall Wingle 5, a pickup truck manufactured by the Chinese company Great Wall Motors. Wingle either means horse in Chinese or is a combo of wind and eagle in English, depending on what story you believe.
Number 4.
The Gaylord Gladiator. Jim and Ed Gaylord were the heirs to a huge bobby pin fortune and wanted to make a car nicer than a Rolls Royce. Unfortunately though, the Gladiator proved too expensive to produce and only 4 were made. And with a name like that, maybe that's a good thing.
Number 3.
The Dodge Challenger Scat Pack. Dodge invented the term Scat Pack in the 1960s by combining the word scat, as in get lost, with Frank Sinatra's popular Rat Pack. And for some reason, they've kept it around even though Sinatra has been dead for 25 years. And as much as I love Dodge, scat stinks.
Number 2.
The Subaru Touring Bruce. The lesson of these last two is don't name your cars after celebrities. The Bruce was a rebadged 1993 Subaru Legacy sold only in Japan because Bruce Willis was in a Subaru TV commercial there. That's the whole story.
Number 1.
Is a tie, the Renault Le Car and the Ferrari LaFerrari. The Renault Le Car and the Ferrari LaFerrari share the embarrassment as two names that are somehow extremely dumb and extremely uncreative at the same time. The Renault 5 was rebranded for the American market as Le Car in order to help market it as the most popular car in Europe. 40 years later, after the Renault, Ferrari explained that in context, the LaFerrari name is supposed to mean that it's the definitive Ferrari, but neither is really working for Le Nolan. Of course car names are stupid. Look at all the stuff they're trying to do at once. They have to stand out. They have to be trademarked. They can't accidentally mean a bad word. What you sometimes end up with is corporate mediocrity. In light of the many obstacles that stand between any car and a good solid name, it's actually a miracle we have any cool ones at all. So don't focus on the fact that most car names are kind of corny. So just hold close your Lamborghini Huracans and your Ford Lightnings, even if you drive a Titan dump. Thank you very much for watching Wheelhouse. This is a fun one, a goofy one. Let me know your favorite car names down in the comments. Make sure to show your work. Tell me why. You know, or don't. It's fine. I mean, even off the top of my head, I can't even think of like a cool car name. It's a really hard job. Like for some reason, the first word that came to mind was the Vision, which is kind of cool actually. But Disney probably already owns that trademark or something. But it's hard. Looking around the room for the Ford Succulent. Boom, done. Hire me. If you excuse me, I have to go park a scat pack on my own. Be kind. I'll see you next time.